What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and patch 12.2 is coming out today or tomorrow, or in the past for League of Legends. A couple things to talk about. First, thank you, Cloud9, for the shirt. Cloud9 sends me stuff, and appreciate Cloud9 for sending me free merch. Cool stuff. Second thing is, as happens in the pro season, patches are always going to be 2 patches behind pro play. The reason for that are twofold. One, pro play gets a patch a full week after the patch comes out. I assume it's some degree of difficulty in getting a tournament realm set up and some degree of consistency across a competitive week and some degree of maybe making sure there's no large-scale bugs that are going to crash a server or something. Some mix of the above. I'm not sure exactly the reasons why, but ultimately what it comes down to is patches come out a week later. The other part is that patches themselves are locked about a week beforehand to go live. So for example, 12.2, where we got patch notes today, January 19th, this was more or less locked around January 12th. Roughly. There's some movement that can happen. For example, there's an Akali patch note, well, a Chemtank patch note, where it was actually built as a micro patch like yesterday. And that's going to be filled into the patch here. But like that's the exception. There is inherent risk in doing that. It's the exception, not the rule. So generally speaking, not what's going to happen there. I mean, you get less time to QA stuff. Like right. It's not the kind of thing that Riot wants to do. What this means is that between those two things happening, functionally, by the time we see pro players play on 12.2, 12.3 has already been locked, which means it's actually impossible for 12.3 to have any notes that respond to 12.2 unless you want to use like day one of LEC as like, all right, well, the Fnatic picked this, we have to nerf it, right? And that's like really unfair and unrealistic to do. So ultimately, that's kind of not possible. So that's the quick TLDR on how pro patches work. For those who have not been informed of that, that's how that works. Let's get into the patch now. 12.2 is actually pretty meaty here. So there we go. We have nerfs to Lulu, Shen, Talon, Qiyana, and Zed. Most of those first ones are actually for high elo stuff, and then Zed is more for low elo. I went and looked at Zed's ban rate across MMRs over the last 30 days, so I was curious. And he goes from being like, top 1, 2, 3 bans, and the higher you go in MMR, the lower his ban goes. I think he's still like the number 10 ban in Challenger. So he's actually still banned quite a lot in ultra high MMR, but his win rate has never been very good in any of them, if I recall correctly, or his win rate goes down a bit as time goes on. Qiyana, however, and Talon, those ban rates just shoot up over time, and they get kicked out for being pretty frustrating. Talon doesn't really appear to be winning all that much, to be fair. Qiyana certainly is, though, but that's what's going on. There is a mid-scale rework to Janna, which is going to be kind of interesting. We'll talk about that. There is a small update to Rengar in terms of working with camouflage, and there's an update to Tahm Kench trying to flatten out the top versus support difference and pushing that. Big buffs to Nocturne, Senna, Samira, Veigar, Volibear, Tristana, Yasuo, and Yone. That all feel pretty good. We'll talk about the reasons why in each of those sections. Modifications to the tempo make it less early game focused. Direct nerf to Chemtech Soul. Direct nerf to Hextech Soul. What I would call a strict buff to Rylai, though theoretically there's some give and some take, and some changes to Lich Bane that are probably power positive as well. And hey, look at this. We've got Zeri coming out, and Zeri's actually a champion that I've been excited about for a while. I think she's my most excited new release in several years, so really cool to see that come out. All right, so intros out of the way. Let's talk about the big news first, which is Janna. Janna's getting a moderate scale rework. Hasn't felt rewarding to play. I would assume the metrics would show that she's becoming less popular and less mained, and so the game is kind of overtaking her. One thing that definitely is happening in League of Legends is the game is getting faster. And this is just what happens. Like when people talk about power creep, this is what they're talking about, where people make changes that should, look good and feel good and are fun to play. And then you realize 3 years later, like, oh, all our cast times got faster. Like more champions can move while casting their spells now. Like before it was like, oh yeah, just Orianna in Syndra, and then like toggled things like, Karthus E. And it's like, oh no, now, a bunch of champions like what's her name? Gwen can freely cast her dash while using her Q to reposition it. Her R has no cast animation at all and just shoots out while she's moving. The fact that her E is a dash with attack range is fine. Like it's just like, that's the ability. It does the thing, whatever. But her W also, right, has no cast animation. And it comes out instantly. Now, to be fair, I think there's totally, a valid reason why ability like W should be instant, right? It's functionally a spell shit. It's functionally a wind wall. I think it makes sense for abilities like that to work this way. Yasuo W, I believe you don't stop while casting. I could be wrong about that one. I do play a lot of Yasuo, but I don't remember ever stopping while casting that spell. But the point is, right, like the game gets faster and power crept. Now suddenly the idea that champions have to stop to cast their spells just starts to disappear from League of Legends. And and then we get to a world where it's like, oh, people are just always faster all the time. And now all of our skill shots are too slow because champions are faster. And now skill shots get faster. And now, right, and you just keep one-upping yourselves. And that's what power creep is, essentially, right? Or like a version of it. Now, I'm not saying any one of these choices is wrong or whatever, but like, and to talk about it not being wrong, by the way, is like, hey, maybe League is a better game where it is faster and champions don't stop as often, whatever else, right? Right? Game design gets better over time. There's a reason no one plays Quake World. Right, no one plays Quake 1, and I love the Quake series. I've played a lot of 1 and 2 and an absolutely absurd amount of Quake 3. And games evolve, right? People hopped off of Quake pretty much entirely. And that's too bad. It's one of my favorite series of games ever, as a multiplayer shooter. But no one plays Quake anymore, by comparison, anyway. I mean, I still watch Rafa beat everybody, but it's a comparatively much less popular game. People on the Counter-Strike and Valorant and Call of Duty and Fortnite and everything else, right? Like shooters advance, and so League of Legends as a MOBA should advance. Otherwise, at some point, a MOBA overtakes League of Legends, arguably, right? So you have to keep up, and that will sometimes look or feel like power creep, and is sometimes just going to be correct to do. All right, so we've done a very long preamble. Let's talk about Janna for real this time. So Janna's move speed is going up by 15. Her base AD is going up by a ton. And her AD growth. I think it's funny that the base AD is this, when like the AD growth is basically double counting here, whatever. But the only really big nerf is attack range down. So this is still part of this set of change, which is she no longer gets 8% of move speed all the time. She only gets it while moving towards allied champions. And she no longer gains a bonus damage on her autos and W based on her bonus move speed. So let's unwind the auto attack stuff and the move speed stuff first. So here is her auto attack damage with her W on and her W off. So if she hasn't learned W yet or it's on cooldown, it is this one. And you can see that her base AD is ultimately really, really close. There's a couple of lines written here. So one, this is, I'm assuming at level 6 you buy boots 1. I'm going to assume at level 9 you buy boots 2, because whatever. And at level 10, the conversion goes from, I think it's 15% bonus move speed to damage, becomes 25% bonus move speed becomes damage. There's another spike there at 10. And like the champion level 10 spike is like literally just you hit level 10, so it happens. And then I'm just kind of guessing when boots 1 and boots 2 comes in. This is also, by the way, assuming for this column here that we're doing W max first on Janna, which in her old build was in fact the order. You would primarily W max first on Janna. And so this was truly... This is like, assuming, I'm guessing correctly on the boots timing, which I think is pretty reasonable. This was, in fact, the order in which she bought stuff. Okay, so there you go. This is going to be accurate. So again, if your W is on cooldown, the AD is honestly really, really close overall. So this is just doing, solid math by the game designer and coming up with numbers that make sense. So, yep, okay, on board. But then, yeah, if you weren't using W, and to be fair, if you're Janna, right, every combo should be auto W. So like you are losing some damage for the auto W trades. And if you were just using W and then you use like auto at other points in time, then again, it was this column. So, arguably, yes, her total attack damage is down slightly, but like there is a lot of green here. So I don't want to really make the case that it's actually absurdly worse. But again, lower attack range is going to do something there, right? So, okay, Janna, so far is going to be worse at early trading. Now that said, as far as the move speed is concerned, her 8% move speed passive was worth almost exactly 25 move speed. So when running away from allies, her move speed went from basically 340 to 330. 330 is still rather fast. Like 330 is very fast for a ranged champion. So Janna is still quick. And this seems to be, somewhat design intent. Janna is arguably the fastest running ranged champion in League of Legends. I can't think of one whose baseline move speed is faster than hers. There might be one, but like in general, Janna is among the quickest. And then still gets 8% towards allies, which is still about 25. So her towards allies move speed, again, went from 340 to 355. So Janna absolutely runs faster towards allies and runs a little bit slower when not toward allies. But I would argue that's 50-50 maybe, right? So, arguably Janna is overall faster across the game League of Legends. I would say that's probably true overall. And then her sort of base attack damage is about the same unless W is up, which of course is sometimes, but her attack range is lower. So this has actually been pretty flat. I would argue that these changes right now up to this point in time are pretty flat. Attack range can hurt a little bit, but otherwise pretty flat. Now the big thing is, and hopefully I didn't cut it off, it's because I realized that I cropped part of my screen. Again, no longer get 8% move speed when running away from ally champions, only when running toward ally champions. Yeah, the bonus damage to W. Okay, so next up is the change to Q. Q has a much softer mana cost on ranking it up. Good change, big fan. Range is up, and time to destination is down. Now, it's very easy to look at these and be like, oh, this is nothing, right? Both the changes mean nothing, but this is actually a very, very big deal. So here is quickly just Q cost. I'm going to assume, and this may be erroneously, but I'm going to assume that you're going to max Q second now. Obviously, you can just max it last, and then the green numbers, start at 14. It doesn't really matter. Like, ultimately, just, hey, at rank 1, this is, these are the breakpoints, whatever. Also, I did my math wrong. 1 second, let me fix that. Wait, no, I didn't do it. 60 to 90. Wait, was it really 60, 90, 100? Or was it 60, 80? Oh, hold on. We're going to pause and fix these numbers because they're definitely wrong a little bit. All right, and we're back. Ultimately, yeah, so I saw 60, 90 when I was reading the patch notes, and I assumed that it was plus 30 every rank, but it's either this is a typo or it really is weird at rank 2, but whatever, right? Here's the actual numbers, and again, still a beneficial mana cost thing. One thing to point out real quick, because we didn't bring it up, this is Janna's scaling, because I didn't talk about it before. This is 30 days all ranks, and Janna tends to scale down with game time. She is not a scaling enchanter. She's an early game enchanter. She is a lane bully, right? She's a lane bully with a weak late game. That is generally speaking her power curve, right? She's pretty good at winning lanes, then kind of falls off. Isn't particularly strong as far as we can tell, at least from this win rate sort of, set. So that is Janna, which means, by the way, that if Janna were to be reshaped to be slightly better late game and slightly worse early game, that would be a reasonable way to take the champion. I wouldn't want to go the other way, where Janna is the lane bully enchanter. That's just annoying, right? It's an enchanter who can already stymie a lot of engages by, queuing the Leona E and overall just like ulting people in team fights and whatnot. It's like, sure, I'm okay with her going a bit more towards late game. I think that makes reasonable sense. So sure, it's maybe going that direction. We'll see if it actually does. But once again, there's Q cost. Nothing too scary here. Okay. So here is Janna Q. So here is distance before and after. It charges over the course of 3 seconds, and the distance is this. Obviously, this should be green, but 110 to 101% distance is obviously not gigantic, but it does make snap Qs a bit better. But here's the big thing, which is the missile speed. So the old missile speed was, if you snapcast Q, 667, which, like, that's not absurdly slow, but it's, like, clearly not fast. 667 over 1,000 units or 1,100 units, whatever, is like, that's pretty dodgeable to be clear. But what you get now is baseline 880 up to 1408, which is a substantially faster missile. So the missile speed's up like a solid 25%, give or take. That's a really, really big deal. So the range up a little bit, okay, whatever. It matters some, but not a huge deal. But the fact that the missile speed is up about 25% is really, really, really meaningful. This is a substantial increase in the reliability of hitting the spell. Keep in mind that Janna Q not only has a damage rank up per rank, the base damage goes up, but also the damage so knockup duration and damage increases per second channeled, as well as the rank up further increases the damage increase per second channeled. So if you are able to reliably hit Qs because the missile speed is 20-something% faster, and even goes a little bit farther, now you have more of a reason to rank up Q because you're going to more reliably hit that damage. You're going to more reliably, get the longer knockup. The knockup doesn't scale with rank, but I believe the cooldown does. So there's, this tool being more reliable means it's more worth putting skill points into instead of just snap casting to knock up a LeBlanc mid W or something, right? So this becomes a much better tool, becomes much better aggressive tool with a 1400 missile speed at full charge. Now keep in mind, again, this is not champion level, right? This is amount of time charged after 3 seconds. It goes up 1408 even from rank 1. This is very meaningful, and this is like the primary change, right? Like this is the primary change of this kit is your Q is a lot faster, and it really is a very big deal. It has a really long CC duration. It is not affected by tenacity because it's knockup. The base damage is very, very high. This is a very big deal and is the primary change of this change list. Next up, though, we have Zephyr. It's going from edge to center. I don't know really a good logic or reason why this is changing. I don't know which one is better for the game. I just know a lot of things keep changing back and forth. I couldn't tell you why I'm not sure. It's whatever. I think this tends to be longer range against squishies and will tend to be less ranged against tanky targets. I'm not sure that's true, but that's my belief. But asterisk, grain of salt, I'm not certain. Slow duration is up, though, which is pretty meaningful by 50%. That's actually quite meaningful. Cooldown is going to be increased pretty heavily, though. Base damage increased by a flat 15. Bonus move speed increased by a flat 2%. But basically, right, there's clearly a lot less reason to rank this ability. They're seemingly trying to push Zephyr into a 1-point wonder. And I actually want to point out, by the way, that with the bonus move speed going up by 2%, 2% of 330 is what, 6.5? Which means instead of being, nerfed by 10 move speed, we're nerfed by 4 move speed and up by like 30 when we're running towards allies, right? So Janna is like definitively a faster moving champion. Of course, yes, longer cooldown for a bigger slow. So it's a more impactful button to press instead of spamming Zephyr, using Zephyr at kind of more important points in time. 3 seconds slow, obviously pretty meaningful, but losing 8 to 12% move speed, also pretty meaningful. So, okay, there's some more calculus there. I think it's fine. Overall seems reasonable to do. Great, sure thing. But yeah, interesting to see, right? Again, base damage is up by a flat 15. I believe we do have some math here. So here's the W cooldown before and after. Obviously, you used to max it first. Now you don't. Cooldown difference is obviously quite high. No matter what you do, it's going to be 12 points. And then I believe we assumed that, okay, if we really did still max W first, well, the early game W actually deals more damage, right? Level 1 Janna with her passive move speed and everything else going on, it in fact deals more damage early game. Her auto attack damage, again, from before, pretty similar. Her W damage actually up very slightly, up until we buy our first set of boots, and then it's going to be worse. And then from that point on, I think we kind of never really catch back up, which, again, with a 15 flat damage add, really there's a consideration that we just 1.1 to the Zephyr and move on from there. That seems pretty likely. Probably shield max and a Q max is going to be the new build. Next up, we have a thing to Eye of the Storm. Now, whenever Janna's abilities slow or knock up at least one enemy champion, aka we land W on an enemy champion, we Q an enemy champion, we ult. Whenever Janna's abilities knock up or slow at least one enemy champion, so it seems to be 1 stack per spell. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe you really get 5 stacks off a 5-man ult, but instead of getting your E cooldown back, you get 20% heal and shield power for 5 seconds. Now, I don't believe this stacks or anything. I think you just have a flat 20% heal and shield power if you have CC'd, which means if you're ulting to knock back a diver, bam, 20% more power on the ultimate. If, someone's diving and you Q or W the Janna and then you shield a homie, bam, 20% more there. Which does mean your combat pattern is kind of like land your W, then shield for a later part of the trade. You don't have to optimize around this. It's not absolutely required. But hey, FYI, it's kind of there. But let's talk about what's going on with this one. So the base shielding is down by 0 to 20, as well as a slight AP ratio decrease. But considering you're getting shield and heal power, you are probably getting something pretty good out of this anyway. And the overall power is going to be higher. I mean, keep in mind, 200 literally becomes 220 with 20% heal and shield power. So that's going to line up. The base cooldown is down 1 to 3 seconds. Considering you're not getting your 20% cooldown refresh anymore, which, by the way, right, this is more than 20%. This is better than 20%. So, right, this would be 2.4. This is 3. So, assuming you're actually going to max Eye of the Storm first, or at least relatively early on, you're getting something a little bit better here. As far as that cooldown is concerned, you're getting something better as far as the base power is concerned. Obviously, this would add, 13% to the AP ratio. So, the AP ratio is buffed if you're getting this going on. So, in kind of all terms, I would argue this is a strict buff to at least late ranks of Eye of the Storm. Obviously, again, cooldown is worse early game. Cooldown is equal to better late game. Yeah, I think it's pretty reasonable overall. And also, the overall shield power is higher because the decay starts later. And I think that's actually a pretty positive thing here. I'm a big fan of later decay, and that means the shield's going to overall have more health at any given point in time. So, okay, great. So what does this mean for Janna, shield, and cooldown? Well, of course, again, the shield is very slightly worse. This is taking an estimated measure of how much AP Janna's going to have, assuming she is going for items that have AP on them. If she doesn't go for items with AP on them, it's going to be, I think, a little bit flatter here, but whatever. And then, obviously, the cooldown difference, which we already talked about, is going to be like this. So, okay, talked about that already. And then, hey, Monsoon, just the tick rate's faster, which doesn't really change much of anything. Doesn't change much. So overall situation is we're going to go into E max Q max for Janna. Q is substantially more reliable, which is a very, very big deal. She's much less of a poke support in lane. Her shields are going to be overall a bit stronger. Her teamfight healing is going to be overall a bit stronger. Her overall crowd control is going to be stronger, but she doesn't have the same lane bullying. We'll see what that looks like, right? Because a lot of Janna's power was in outright lane bullying. Like, she was objectively a good lane bully. She is no longer a great lane bully. She might be okay in lane, I'm not really certain, but she's got a lot better tools for the mid to late game because full power Q is going to hit more reliably, and they do a lot. So that's going to be the reshape on Janna. I think it's cool, right? Playing around the Q is pretty neat. One thing that I believe was in this change list, but not in the patch notes right now, though I assume it shipped, is Q is meant to have, or was meant to have, an indicator for her allies to say, hey, by the way, here's the way Q is going, here's its width, and here's its duration, like, or here's its length and width. So by the way, just so you know, can you zone them into it? And if that's really coming in, that's going to be a really big deal as well. Next up is a nerf to Lulu, whose win rate is very, very high. For solo queue has been a really premier pick and ban. Has been seeing some pro play as well. Definitely a very valuable champion. So Lulu nerfs, just a 1 second nerf on Whimsy. Not a huge deal, but here is Lulu as a champion. Overall, pretty flat by win rate. Lulu doesn't scale necessarily. I mean, she's a decent laner because a lot of enchanters are decent laners. Well, the enchanters who aren't really, really squishy, like Yuumi and Sona, tend to be decent laners. So, right, we saw Janna, we see Lulu here, they tend to be decent laners. But Lulu doesn't, like, substantially gain more power. Like, if you think Lulu's strong, Lulu's strong. She is. Like, she's objectively a strong champion, but, like, doesn't really have any power traps or power spikes. She's just kind of good. And there's a W cooldown. W second has been the most common skill order, but W first, which even way back in the champion spotlight was what I recommended way back in the day, was her higher win rate build. That might change slightly with this flat cooldown nerf, but overall, not a huge deal, but a small nerf all the same. So next up is Nocturne. Nocturne saying he's not doing all too well in most skills and most builds. So getting 10 health growth and getting 10% AD ratio bump on Dustbringer. So here is Nocturne's base health before and after. This is without any health on items, like you're building a, Eclipse or Axiom Arc or Duskblade or all the above. Base health moves in this way. Worth noting that people are building him wrong item-wise. Stridebreaker is higher win rate than Axiom Arc. Goredrinker as well. They're also building him wrong Rune Rise. Lethal Tempo, at least after the nerfs, is worse than Conqueror. So both on an item situation and a Keystone situation, Nocturne would do better going Conqueror, going Stridebreaker, and just building him as a bruiser. That tends to be more positive. As far as Q damage, this is the direction Q damage goes. Looking at pretty standard bonus AD builds, you're looking at a little bit more damage than the ability. It's not a ton, but you can see here that Nocturne overall, right, we can see by the win rate. This is true, by the way, with his bruiser builds as well. The win rate still went this way, even when Stridebreaker and Goredrinker were the common options. Nocturne still tended to fall off with time. Turns out that, getting a bunch of ganks off and getting sideliner ahead pre-15 is a pretty good way to force unanimous surrender. And then, we get into team fights, and Nocturne no longer is a side lane nearly as well because people start team fighting. And Nocturne really wants a split-up map, and split-up maps happen less as time goes on. So unsurprisingly that Nocturne tends to fall in win rate as time goes on. But hey, if you can keep a split map, if you can keep coordination with your team and keep split up a bit more, it's going to look pretty good. Nocturne can go play for a side lane, go play to dive bomb with a Kale, and it's going to look pretty good. And again, you should build him bruiser. And so the fact that the Q scaling is up, the fact that his baseline scaling is up, is going to flatten this out a very little bit. All right. Next up, we have Qiyana. Qiyana certainly doing quite well in the mid lane. Again, a really big problem for ultra high elo as well. So base health regen is down and Q invisibility is down. So here is Qiyana. This is jungle and then mid. As a jungler, she scales. As a mid laner, she actually forces some unanimous surrenders by sub 20 minutes, and then drops back down and scales back up. So it seems like she has a really good early game. Again, good at forcing surrenders, good at snowballing herself for a side lane, and then has to kind of get back up as a scaling assassin. Seems to be her growth curve. As far as the jungler is concerned, doesn't quite have that same early dominance, but just scaling pick, scaling pick, scaling pick, scaling pick. So with an early game nerf, by nerfing base health regen, this probably do less to nerf Qiyana jungle, more to nerf Qiyana mid, because of course, health regen is going to be generally more impactful in a mid lane perspective because Qiyana has, all junglers have a ton of regen tools, right? They have smites, they have the Omnivamp from the the machete and whatnot. In general, base health regen means less for a jungler. So, okay, mid lane focus nerf for this one. Makes total sense to me. That seems fine. Could have also gone for a, per level stat scaling nerf, since mid laners gain more XP than junglers. That was also a possibility if you wanted to, close that gap as well. But I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a base health regen nerf. The nerf for early game, I think it's reasonable. And then obviously the invisibility duration down by about 15% seems pretty reasonable as well. Next up is Rengar. Rengar now innately can leap at enemies with his next basic attack if he is currently in camouflage. Now it's a passive on the R, meaning you cannot level 1 with Senna, have her press camo, and then jump at people. You do have to get to level 6 there. But yes, I'm expecting Senna Rengar to be a thing. Honestly, if you have a friend who knows how to play Rengar, yeah, you can probably play some Senna Rengar. It's probably going to look pretty good overall. This seems pretty positive. Just like give Rengar some extra leaps. Keep in mind, Senna's camouflage, I believe, does give some movement speed. So it does kind of give Rengar a free ultimate. Minus all the damage stuff that comes with the ultimate, but yeah, it's there. As they're mentioning here, Chemtank Rift does hurt him because he used Brush, so okay, Camouflage is there. That said, Camouflage has been nerfed a couple of times. In the previous patch in 12.1, it now checks when you enter the zone if you cast a spell recently, and won't camouflage you until that kind of timer has happened. And in this patch, the timer is getting increased to 2.5 seconds, so positive situations here. We'll talk more about those rifts later on when we get to those sections. But overall, yeah, obviously it's a strict buff to Rengar. We are going to see more players play Rengar bot. Again, Senna is actually very good in a supporting role. She's very good at in a supporting role when she's alongside a mage or alongside a melee champion. Because that, as a physical damage dealer, wants magic damage in her lane, or as someone with a big Q pass through, wants a melee champion to heal through when doing combat stuff. So all that makes sense here. Next up is Samira. Samira definitely was one of those champions who got hit really hard by the shield bow nerfs. Essentially, shield bow went down by 1.5 to 2% win rate, and there were some champions who went to like 47% win rate. And I know that Reddit loves to bitch and moan and whine about how the win bros, they get so much design help. They keep looking at them. Riot's playing favorites. Listen, these champions sit at like 48% win rate at all times. Like, their overall win rates are actually low. Riot playing favorites is keeping their win rates low, which means when they do get nerfed, their win rates are now hit Oracle bounds and then must be buffed back up. That's what's actually happening, by the way. That there's a bunch of these champions that have like 48% win rates that people consider like Riot favorites. It's like, no, they're just bad. Like, I'm sorry that you're not good against them, but they're not actually very strong champions. So deal with it. So Samira is one of these champions who got hit pretty hard by shield bow, doesn't really have a different mythic option. And so, okay, gets up to 50 flat damage added to the R, which, for what it's worth, is equal to exactly 10, just here's 10 AD during the ultimate. Of course, her ultimate is not her entire power budget, nor is it the entire time she's playing the game, so it's not as good as 10 AD for obvious reasons, but that is the same power level here. And shield bow, of course, lost 5 AD, so there you go. So here is Samira as a champion. She actually has another U-shaped curve where, again, she can be an early game bully. She can force the enemy's surrenders by having a very good early game, but then she is a late game scaling, eventually big team fight cleanup champion. So here's the damage difference. Again, is a flat 50, of course, at all points in time. But that means that, maybe it is a little bit to push her towards that mid-game push. And kind of go in that way. Obviously, if Riot ever wanted to do away with linear scaling, which, they could do. I don't know. I'm kind of coming off of my desire for clean numbers and linear scaling. I think there's other design goals that are more important. You could do something like, make Samira's rank 2 ult actually a power spike, and then like rank 3 gives you comparatively less. It could be done, but also I kind of like the linear. It's just kind of like a little intellectually satisfying to have flat scaling, but it's whatever. Anyway, yeah, minor buff here. Certainly not doing all that well. And by the way, like, for what it's worth, for reference here, even though these numbers like look pretty good, what, she's 50 and then she's 51, like, why are you considering her weak, right? It's like, well, the 50 minus is like 8% of games, right? Like, not a lot of games you need to miss surrenders, and 51 plus is another like 8% of games. So like in like, maybe it's like more like 10, I forget exactly, right? But like they're the edge of the bell curve, right? Like, most games are on that 48, 48, 49, right? Like, good like 75% of games are sub 50, and then like the fringe cases where you unanimous surrender or go ultra late, she's good in those cases. But like, those are rare, right? Those are rare. So, she's usually quite weak. And again, the games end there. All right, so next up is Shen. Shen is getting nerfed. He did, I assume, gain some win rate with the teleport nerfs. That said, the teleport changes, I think, were really positive for the game. So, not surprised that Shen indeed is doing too well. Now, that said, Shen was already an exceptionally strong pick pre-change. It's not like he went from like a 48% winner champion to a 53% winner champion. He went from like 52 to 53, right? Like he was already very good and just became overbearing. So, okay, Shen nerfs, whatever. So it is a pretty much a flat 1% max health nerf on Big Q. So little Q isn't any different, the base damage isn't any different, but Big Q is getting a bit weaker. So here is the overall damage, picking... this is his overall auto attack plus empowered Q damage on a sample target, and it's down about 6 to 7% damage. Not a big surprise here. And you can see that Shen, yeah, at all stages of the game, at all surrender phases, has been doing really well. Once again, really, really good in the pre-20 stuff where, you know, he goes in for the big ult and it turns around a bot lane triple kill and unanimous surrender, right? And he's really spiking unanimous surrender. And then just is a good scaling tank option. So, you know, if he's not forcing the surrenders, which is, again, only 10% of games or whatever, then, okay, you know, he's a scaling pick, you know, in that regard. Okay. Next up is Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench is getting a pretty big reshape to push him down in top lane and up in support. After seeing an entire season with new Tahm Kench, pretty clearly he is not overtaking pro play at the support role. So, okay, let's try to fix that. Let's get him back and allow players to play Tahm Kench support, because some players really did like playing that. Now that the Devour is not on a basic cooldown, think it can be a healthier design. Why not bring him back and try to make this one happen? I think it's totally reasonable to do so. So we've got a bigger CC output, which is arguably support skewed, right? Not more damage, more crowd control. Amount of damage stored into gray health is now based on 2 visible enemy champions nearby, even if they might be dead, which means in top lane, yeah, thick skin isn't very good nearly as often until you're getting ganked, and then suddenly he's really good as, you know, an anti-gank, which, to be fair, is going to be, you know, a little wonky, right? Because it's going to feel strange where suddenly, you know, the Zap comes to gank and suddenly the gray health amount is tripled, right? It's 15% becomes 45%. Literally the storage is tripled as soon as your jungler shows up to gank, which, yeah, is going to feel a little bit weird. I understand that. Like, yeah, that's a little odd, but there's only so many tuning levers for top versus support. So, you know, personally, I don't think it's like a problem or anything. And then the amount of healing you're getting from the gray health has been increased at, you know, everything before level 18, which is basically the entire game. So worth pointing out that the 45 to 65 is the same, actually. So, you know, if you were, you know, a bot laner already, this is a non-change. You got a bigger slow. This is basically not a change. It's occasionally worse because occasionally there's not a second person nearby. But the amount of healing you're getting is up a little bit, so that will be a small buff. So we'll start with just the thick skin stuff right now, then we'll go into the R. So Tahm Kench, solo gray health and healing, and I believe this is Tahm Kench top lane. You can see he is an absurdly strong lane bully, 59% win rate if the game is a unanimous surrender. Yeah, Tahm Kench is really good in the early game and falls off. If you're not closing games out early on with Tahm Kench or getting absurdly large leads to eventually finish the game as the win with Tahm Kench, you eventually will outscale him. And a lot of this is because you got to the point where the other top laner finally caught back up after dealing with the Tahm Kench lane bullying. That's kind of how that works, right? Okay, but here is the amount of shield stored. The current build for Tahm Kench is maxing thick skin last, actually. W max second has been the thing. But I'm going to assume maxing is second now just because it seems like the right thing to do. And so it's just to like kind of let the numbers kind of line up here. So assuming you're going to max W second, you're always storing less shield value. Now, obviously in the early game, you're storing a lot less shield value, but even as time goes on, you're still storing a lot less shield value. As far as the amount of healing received, because the numbers, of course, did go up, even if you're maxing the ability second, you're still receiving a lot less healing. So Tahm Kench in the top lane is definitely getting smaller shields and definitely regaining less health after the damage comes through. Right? You know, before 30% of damage that you dealt to Tahm Kench got turned into health. Now it's 7% of damage that Tahm Kench got turned into health. Here is Tahm Kench in the support role. As a support, Tahm Kench is not very good at all points in the game. He's not doing too well. Once again, seems to have a fairly early spike, but overall then is seemingly a scaling tank pick. That if Tahm Kench support didn't try to, you know, force an early game win because he is very good or super early laner. Once again, U-shaped power curves. There's actually a lot of these, right? We saw it with Qiyana, we saw it with Shen, we see it here with Tahm Kench. U-shaped power curve for Tahm Kench support. Which is, you know, just very strange, right? That Tahm Kench support scales when, you know, Tahm Kench top doesn't, right? I just think it's kind of neat where they both have the early game laning power spike. But since the shield is going to be arguably the same, then what we have here is this healing, right? Percentage of damage taken becomes this. I think we're still doing maxing the shield second for some reason. Just bear with me for this. And yeah, right, it's a lot more regen, right? You're staving off a lot more damage. You're taking 20% of the damage taken. It's still gonna kind of come back as healing. Obviously, the shields are more efficient, but you know, pretty solid stuff here. Then we finally have Tahm Kench's Devour change. So the shield is up by 100, 200, 300, and the AP ratio is up by 50%, which means, hey, the idea of Demonic Embrace Tahm Kench, hey, maybe, who knows? I mean, I don't think he should do it because you really only have Tongue Lash for that one, and that seems pretty bad, but Flat Shield is up pretty substantially. I mean, maybe, I don't know, someone goes for a Staff of Flowing Water, Baron buff, things like that. It's kind of minor, but whatever. I guess it's a possibility. I don't know if it's adaptive stat is AP or AD. So, you know, theoretically, if you're running like a Relic Shield, you know, that would give you a little something. But, you know, the shield is up quite a bit. And then also move speed on Devouring Ally, instead of slowing by 30, 20, and 10%, it's just a flat 40% move speed buff. So this is interesting, right? So we talked about the power curves again, right? It's U-shaped for support, and it's down and to the right for top lane. Well, better scaling on the ultimate, you could try to argue is top lane focused. You know, getting ranks here. No, again, it's not on devouring an enemy. That's not changed in any way, but the rank up gets better. At the same time, though, the rank up doesn't get better on this. Now, it's also the same ability, right? It's the Ally Devour. So I don't know if this makes the scaling better, or, you know, it's more of a spike early game by getting your 500 shield and your 40% move speed buff. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Either way, here's what's going on with Tahm Kench. So the shield is up pretty substantially once again, 25 to 50%. Sounds great. The AP ratio is up 50% as well. So if you do have AP, it's, you know, 50%. It's moving towards 50% buff at all times. That's a very, very large shield. It's very, very meaningful. But here's the part that I think is really interesting, which is if you're going to have someone devoured for the entire duration, how much distance are you covering as Tahm Kench before and after the changes? Now, asterisk here, both slows and hastes have diminishing returns. So in some cases, you're not getting the full value of this entire thing. But it's still going to be directionally accurate that, yes, you in fact cover twice the distance during your ultimate that you would have before. Instead of running for 3 seconds on a 30% slow, you're running for 3 seconds on a 40% haste, and that means you're covering twice the distance, which is pretty meaningful. This ends up being like a 400 unit dash or so, which is like, that's good. Like that's almost a flash of distance, which is, I mean, pretty meaningful, right? It obviously, to still walk through the whole way, they can slow you, do all these things, but like that's actually pretty meaningful. This is a really substantial buff to defensive ults. Really, 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 really big deal. Worth looking at for sure. Next up is Talon. Talon jungle is, really, really annoying people. Now, at this point in time, after the most recent Talon nerfs, he is not, as far as I can tell, an overpowered jungler. This is one of those things where perception is happening, right? Much like Yasuo and Yone, where I'm sure they do feel frustrated to play against sometimes, and Zed and whatnot. They're not actually terribly strong, but they are frustrating. And look, I sympathize with like, well, I'm going to ban things that I don't like playing against. I'm on board, right? You do you. If it's annoying, it's annoying, and you ban what's annoying. But he's not actually winning a ton of games. Like, this is the case, right? He's not actually stomping games. He jumps over walls and stuff, but like, if you catch him in the river, he just dies. If he's not ahead, he doesn't do anything. He is good at clearing good, and like, he takes your camps, and that's strong. But again, he's not like absurdly overpowered. In elite play, yeah, I think it's kind of moving that direction a little bit, but like, as far as I can tell, looking at win rates, it wasn't anywhere absurd. And we saw pro play already, and we see basically no Talon in pro play either. But he's losing some damage on Rake. It'll slow down his clear speed, and so here we go. So Talon, by the way, was a scaling jungle pick. Obviously, the damage difference is going to be a flat percentage, because 125 becomes 105%, and it's 90% off the damage. But here is the total W damage on monsters, assuming like sort of expected attack damage growth from items. So yeah, there's your Rake damage to monsters before and after. And so yeah, he's gonna be even weaker in the early game. I think as time goes on, I assume Rake's overall jungle clear is less important to the kit, and your base auto attacks and your Qs and whatnot are doing kind of more of the heavy lifting. Keep in mind that jungle camp stops scaling durability after like level 9. So, you know, from here onwards, every bit of bonus damage you gain is just like more instant clear. So definitely gonna be a pretty big hit to his early clear. And yeah, that's going to matter, right? It's going to be relevant, but yeah, you can see here that like over the last month across all elos, and again, yeah, he probably skews up with MMR a little bit, but like across all elos, there's not even a single win rate band where he's above 50%, right? So he wasn't really crushing people. he's annoying, and people take annoyance as power and just stop there, right? Like for again, most players, Talon is not overpowered. So, just saying. Next up, we have Tristana. So Tristana is in an interesting spot where Tristana is not doing well in mid lane or bot lane. I forget which one had the lower win rate overall. It actually might be in the notes that we're going to see in a second. But one thing I saw people moan about, because, the internet loves their knee-jerk reactions, is like, oh my gosh, we're bringing back the Tristana all-ins in mid lane. It's like, well, Tristana is objectively not good. No one plays her in high elo, no one plays her in pro, no one plays her in any other elos, and her win rates are low in all those places, which means Tristana objectively needs buffs. So if Tristana objectively needs buffs because she's unplayable literally everywhere, unplayable with the fact that no one plays her anywhere, aka unplayable, needs buffs, where would you buff her? Because you have a couple options, right? So you have the ability of buffing her AD ratios, which means you're buffing her for elite play, where players are good at farming compared to the average player, which means she's only going to be in pro play. That's a bad buff. You could buff her stat scaling, which buffs her for mid lane more than bot lane, which is what people don't want, right? People don't want Tristana running around winning through mid lane by being a lane bully and like outscaling you as well. So you can't do stat scaling. So what you've got left? Early game stats, because that will maybe buff bot lane a little bit more than it'll buff mid lane. Okay, do you want to buff early damage like rank 1 E or rocket jump damage or base AD? No, because you're going to all in you at level 2. Okay, well then your choices are baseline durability at low ranks, right? Like, we know she's unplayable, and we know we're worried about mid lane, so what would you do? Like if you believe this is a bad buff, what is your other buff, right? Like, what part of her kit would you buff? Because she's currently unplayable. And in order to make her playable, you have to do something. What would you do? This is like the safest option you could possibly do, which is, yeah, she's a bit better against, wave clear and whatnot and harass, and she'll survive lanes a bit more and gets less all in. And okay, yeah, sure. She like, in fact, like wins the stat check by not getting bursted. But like, she was trying to all in you by one-shotting you anyway. Like, does it really matter that she maybe survives a Syndra ult now? That was already a bad matchup for her because she just like E'd you out of rocket jump and you had no gameplay left. Like, I don't know. People are silly. Anyway, yeah, small buff of Tristana. I mean, it'll move the win rate by like maybe 1%, maybe a bit less, whatever. Next up, we have Veigar. So real quick, by the way, because of course we have the math. So here is Tristana in mid lane and in bot lane. So worth noting that the mid lane win rate curve is very sharp, right? She falls off a cliff. This is one thing I find very interesting, is that people are talking about like, oh my gosh, it's a double marksman comp. Like, get ready, it's scary, double marksman. But like, double marksman comps don't scale. Because think about it, unless you're playing a hard mage carry top lane, which like Kennen, Gwen, that's it? Really? Right? Like, what else do people play up there? It's like, well, guess what the enemy team's going to do? Their Ornn's going to build a Randuin's and a Thornmail and Steel Caps, and you're going to lose the game. In most games, Tristana mid falls off a cliff because it's very easy to skip MR and armor stack and just crush the other team. So Tristana is indeed an early game bully, who then falls off because it's very hard to slot Trist mid into comps because AD champ, right? And then on the other side, you have Tristana bot lane, who also is an early game champion, but much less early game skewed, right? Because, playing she's not guaranteed to be in double marksman where the tanks outscale your whole team. Works out pretty well in that regard. So yeah, still an early game focused champion, and it is in fact skewing towards early game some more. Arguably, yes, Riot could do more to try to have the E damage scale more with champion level. They could do more to make champion levels mean more. All these risk Trist mid being a bigger deal. That means they could probably nerf Trist base MR as an extra layer for mid lane. They could nerf Trist's wave clear explosive charge a little bit to make that weaker until maybe you have more character levels. Like Tristana's E mini damage could scale with character level, for example, right? Who knows? There's a bunch of things you could do. There are a bunch of levers you could try to pull out and try to change things around. But end of the day, she's an early game lane bully. They are in fact buffing her early game. That is a true statement. But again, if you're trying to be really concerned about mid lane Trist overtaking, where do you go? I don't know. But yeah, you probably could look at something and figure something out down the line. But this is where we are. Tristana's in a weird spot where people are afraid of mid lane, where she ostensibly gains more levels, but she isn't a scaling pick, which means you would want to make gaining levels mean more. So, what do you do without doing another mid-scale rework like happened with Aurelia and Silas and Janna and whatnot, which maybe is possible, but anyway, difficult. Alrighty, next up we have buffs to Veigar. So Veigar is getting 1 second off the Q cooldown, and upon killing large monsters and large minions, instead of getting 2 AP, you get 3 AP, which means, this is 1 AP every 90 seconds when killing cannon minions. Not a big deal, right? And even in the ultra late game, where you are, getting a cannon every wave, it's 2 AP a minute from minute 25 onwards. Right? Like, it's not that big of a deal. So, this thing is not gigantic. It does feel cool. Like, this is the kind of stuff where, like, it feels really good. I love these kinds of buffs because it coaches players into kind of making the right choices. It's a uniquely Veigar thing. I just think this is like a really, really neat change. I could see this even going up to 4 at some point in time, and just like, it's just neat overall. I'm just like a fan of this change because it is a strict buff, and it's Veigar's unique thing. His cooldown going down to 4 seconds is obviously pretty meaningful as well. It makes it much more reliable to farm stacks of Q, to either for harass or for last hitting and whatnot. It makes him a better team fighter, and I can see Veigar gaining a lot of power from this. So here is Veigar as a mid laner. I'm pretty sure it's mid lane and not support. If I'm trolling, maybe I am trolling, but I believe this is Veigar mid. And he is unsurprisingly a scaling pick. Now this is interesting, and it's a discussion I'm going to have in a different video because I don't want to take too long on this one. But as a quick sort of side comment, the idea of a scaling pick, I think, is bogged down in terminology. So clearly Veigar scales, right? I mean, he scales infinitely. He gets Q, he hits a minion with it, kills a minion with it, hits a champion with it, gains AP. And that keeps happening forever, right? It'll get to a certain point, theoretically, after a 17-hour-long game, where Veigar has 17,000 ability power, he literally one-shots everyone at all times, and can build just pure tank and haste, and outscales the entire world. Theoretically, yes, you can assemble Affinity Stones and blow up, your entire team in one spell. That said, League of Legends doesn't play to that duration, right? 1% of all games go beyond 50 minutes, right? Something like that. Like, that's probably like the rough math. So he doesn't really scale infinitely. He scales to a certain number. And that number is, let's call it 300 ability power. I don't know what the number actually is, right? But like, there's a number that he actually scales to in 90% of games. And so that's his actual scaling, right? His actual scaling is that number. And actually in half of all games, right, it's done at 30 minutes, which means he's scaled up to 80 bonus ability power or whatever the number is, right, by that point in time. So still not the actual number. So that makes him not that strong of a scaling pick. If you're saying theoretical in games that don't actually play out, sure, yeah, he scales infinitely. But in the real world, his game scaled to a certain degree, and he is a moderately scaling pick. He gains 3% win rate from the Unanimous Surrender to 95% of games end by this point in time. Right, by comparison to Kayle, where Kayle still plays Unanimous Surrenders and still usually gets to level 16 games, much like Veigar's level 16 games, and 95%, the top 20% of games get to that point in time, and that win rate difference is far higher than Veigar, right? And so, as the last thing I'll say, it's like, imagine someone told you Kayle outscales Veigar. It depends on what they mean by that, right? Because I would argue Kayle does outscale Veigar. Because games end, right? Games end, and Kayle just wants to hit 16, and then she has outscaled all of her ilk, right? And yeah, she has to play around the cage, and there's stuff going on. Like, Veigar may actually be like decent into Kayle in some cases, but Kayle outscales Veigar because 99% of games end before 50 minutes, right? Most games get to the point where Kayle is about to reach 16, and that's scary, and that's where games actually travel. So that's kind of the point on scaling. I'll do probably a bigger video on scaling at some point in time, but I want to kind of get that out there, that Veigar is a moderately scaling pick, and there are several champions like Zilean, like Kayle, who outscale Veigar, as unintuitive as that sounds. Next up, Volibear. Volibear is not doing too well in top lane or in jungle. He's getting 0.5 AD growth, and he's getting 2 seconds off the E cooldown. So here is Volibear's base AD before and after. You can see he's relatively flat in both roles, 48 to 49 in top lane, 49 to 50 in jungle. So arguably a slightly stronger jungler than he is top laner, but not very popular in both places. And here is a buff that actually is skewed toward top lane. Now, it does make Volibear slightly more of a scaling pick. I think that's okay. That's not necessarily a problem. But it does, skew him slightly towards the late game as a very lightly scaling bruiser champion. Seems reasonable. It seems okay. But it's kind of worth pointing out here. It goes up to now 120 base AD, which is still not that high for a Juggernaut. And the fact that it was only 3 per level is actually pretty low for his class, so I'm kind of glad to see that one get some love. Obviously, keep in mind that he does have the lightning passive, so there is actually a reason for Volibear to have low base AD, because he, in any reasonable combat pattern, is going to get the lightning passive on, and then, much like Kai'Sa, he just has free on-hit damage Just as base AD, is that really the part we're measuring here? And so there's an argument against having high base AD. Again, it's not that high anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But right, there's give and take there. 2 seconds on the E cooldown, of course, pretty meaningful as well. Sure, it's 15% off that cooldown. Okay, cool beans, great. You could argue this is early game focused. I'm not sure it is, but seems like a solid mid-sized buff. So here is Yasuo. So Yasuo, of course, lost a lot of power with the shield bone nerf in the last patch. And so he is getting 5% total AD on his Q, which means this asymptotically approaches 5% more damage on all Qs. Keep in mind that the AD portion of Steel Tempest is what crits. I believe the base damage version doesn't. So in crits, it moves even faster towards that 5% bonus damage asymptote, which of course, by 2 items, you're 100% crit chance, so that's where that goes. So here is Yasuo. Now, I believe this is 30 days all ranks and was done a week ago. So the vast majority of games we are measuring here are actually pre-shield bone nerf. I just kind of want to point that out because the numbers are otherwise going to feel a little strange when I talk about how his win rate's very, very low. So yes, Yasuo is an early game champion who is about 50% win rate across, the last month at all ranks, again, counting pre-shield bone nerfs, and shield bone brought him down to like a 48% win rate champion. And so, kind of goes back up here. Probably doesn't completely compensate for the fact that shield bone got nerfed, but here is his Q damage, assuming a traditional build. I'm not including crit here, by the way, but this is sort of the base Q damage, assuming AD growth. And yeah, it is indeed, 3 to 4% more damage. We can add a decimal for funsies, and, yeah. It's 3 to 3.5% more damage, moving towards 5% the more he crits, which is going to be, again, a lot of the time. But again, also worth noting that he is somewhat of an early game pick. The ranks in E and ranks in Windwall don't mean all that much, and so he doesn't really spike any farther afterwards. By comparison, Yone has actually pretty substantial teamfight power. Yone is a scaling pick. Yone is a weak laner that you should be able to bully. If you can't bully him, some of this is, by the way, lethal tempo, to be clear. Lethal Tempo is giving both Yasuo some early game power and even Yone some early game power, and yet Yone is on the losing side of a unanimous surrender more often than not. He's on the losing side of a 25-minute surrender more often than not. He needs to get to beyond 25 minutes before he's in general stronger than the average champion, but he in fact does scale. Of course, keep in mind his E is a big damage amp, right? Now his E damage amp, if you shield the damage, 0 of that damage stores into the E-pop. If you exhaust him and he's dealing 1/3 less damage, that is all being reduced and counted as reduced when it goes towards the E-pop. Obviously, if you Zonias, you can Zonias whatever you want, but all that stuff matters, right? If you have armor and he's kind of wailing into you and dealing 1/3 the damage, you have 200 armor, that's all calculated as you dealing 1/3 damage when the E-pop comes in. So the E is true damage, but it's true damage in the sense that, whatever you actually dealt, 25% that pops at the end, right? So, it's not really the most absurd stuff out there. But again, right, here is what he gets out of that 5% more attack damage. It's, again, asymptotically approaching 5% more damage. Okay, great, here you go. Cool beans, that's you. Good job, him. Yone again, right? Same change. Zed is losing some flat damage on the ultimate. I believe I didn't put in a slide for this one because it's just a flat 35% damage off the initial mark. Of course, the rest of this is the same. So, you're losing 35% of the front damage, but of course the rest of your abilities are going to do something. And I could have gone for what does QE auto plus Deathmark deal before and after. I didn't build that. I'm sorry I didn't. But essentially, this is a slight late game focused. Actually, I'm not even sure it is late game focused, right? Because 25% of all damage and then 100% of your total AD. The 100% total AD is arguably a bigger portion of your damage than later on when it's 50% of all damage and 100% base AD or total AD. So I don't know if it's really an early game or late game focused nerf, but it is a moderately sized nerf, and Zed is going down mostly because of ban rate. He's not actually all that strong. So next up we have item changes. Lich Bane is getting 15 ability haste. The cooldown is going back to 1.5 seconds, and the math's getting changed back on Spellblade. Higher AP ratio, lower base AD, lower cooldown, and of course, again, ability haste with also a better looking build path. Phoenix Codex is one of the best items of the game. So Phoenix Codex is just better than Blasting Wand. It makes this item feel outstanding to build. So cool beans there. But let's talk about what's going on with Lich Bane. Here we are. Why is Abyssal Mask there? I don't know. It's Lich Bane. Here we go. We did it. Once again, so of course, same AP, same move speed, same cost, but hey, here's some ability haste. So instead of paying 1,000 gold for Spellblade, you are paying about 625 gold for the Spellblade. Okay, fair enough. But is the Spellblade better or worse? Because of course, yes, we're gaining about 400 gold worth of stats here. Well, here is our Victor Lich Bane example. And so basically his base AD matters. So I'm going to say, hey, by the way, here's AP on the left. And for reference, here's what level he is for these AP stacks. And this is about right. I think it's like a reasonable thing that at level 10, maybe you're on 2 items, right? You're on Ludens plus Lich Bane. And so you're at 160 AP at level 10. And, generally speaking, by level 18 with a full build, maybe you're at 480. This is like roughly going to be accurate. Like, right, it's going to be tough to say entirely, but like this is about what it's going to look like. And so what do we have going on here? Well, the damage is clearly worse at every stage of the game until 800 ability power. The burst damage is definitively worse at every stage of the game until 800 ability power. The 1.5 base AD did more heavy lifting the AP ratio for a while. So for the vast majority of the game, Lich Bane is less bursty, but it gives you ability haste and the cooldown is shorter. And so that's going to depend what your combat pattern is. If you were doing EQ auto one-shot, which is a lot of what Victor could be doing, it is worse at EQ auto R one-shot. Just definitively, right? It is definitely less bursty. But if you are going to be able to play longer form team fights, well, it's got free haste on it, right? It's got 400 more gold of stats, which just makes it a better item. The difficulty in kind of measuring the rest of this, though, is the 400 gold worth of stats worth the 30 to 50 less damage on Lich Bane, right? That's pretty close, I would say, right? Getting 30 to 50 less damage in a combo is probably worth about that 400 gold, and I would argue is actually relatively equivalent. At least it's like close enough that it's debatable, I would argue. Because keep in mind, right, for 400 gold, you can buy an Amp Tome. Does an Amp Tome give you 40 damage in your full combo? Yeah, I mean, a full combo has about a 2.0 AP ratio, so yeah, it's about the same. So what did I say? It's about the same, right? It's comparable. It's debatable. It's pretty close. What did I say? I was right. And so what it comes down to then is, okay, is the cooldown change going to do much for you, right? Is the cooldown change going to do much for you? And the argument is probably yes, but keep in mind that like most mage combos are like hit my buttons, auto attack once, and then by the time my next spell's back from cooldown, it's 5 seconds later anyway, right? So 1.5 versus 2.5 isn't actually relevant, at least not very often. I mean, I play Kale, and I actually am doing an ability haste focus Kale where I'm doing Cosmic Drive third, and the E cooldown is 4 seconds. So like I can, auto and throw a Q in for the slow. I'm not gonna wait on my Q to like not slow someone, not shred their armor and MR just for Lich Bane proc. I can wait on W, I suppose, and like wait for Lich Bane to come down for a W, and then I get an extra one that way. Like that's the only way it's going to work though. And it also means like I'm not building Cosmic Drive, which means my E cooldown is actually more like 5 seconds or 6 seconds and not 4. So like, right, it's not actually that easy to get the 1.5 second cooldown and use it. That said, there's always going to be ancillary cases. I think it is very easy to like overemphasize breakpoints when talking about League of Legends. And be like, oh, well, just because the item's 100 gold cheaper, you're still not going to buy it in time for the second dragon fight, so it's not really a buff. Like, that kind of stuff is so up your own ass that, like, it's not worth actually talking about. Like, in some cases, sure, it's going to matter. But, like, in general, you're going to find times where the 1.5 second cooldown is going to come up, and it's going to give you a buff, and it's going to feel good. Like, maybe Victor's second rotation, he passes second Q, and then his E comes up, exactly 2 seconds later, and now your second E actually does have Lich Bane on it, right? And, like, that's going to happen sometimes, and so it's going to fit the build. So that's kind of the thing. I would say overall Lich Bane is buffed. Next up is another very, very big buff. Rylai's Crystal Scepter is 400 gold cheaper for 300 less gold of ability power and 100 more gold worth of health, which is overall a very big buff to the item. So here is the before and after. You were paying 2,900 gold worth of stats for 3,000 gold. Now you're paying 2,700 gold worth of stats for 2,600 gold. So now it's suddenly a gold efficient item. That is, quite cheap. And I like this for 2 reasons. So one, I mean, I like the buff, right? It's a cool item. It's not purchased very often. I think it's a cool item. I like buying Rylai's. I buy a couple of Rylai's champions. I like Singed. I like Mordekaiser. They're both good with Rylai's. I like Kale. She's also good with Rylai's. Just any, right? Like, I could repeatedly apply spell effects to you is a great Rylai's champion. So, again, Singed, Mord, even arguably Zac, Kale. Those are all great choices. Let's move on. So the cool thing here is I think it also fits what I believe is an important tenet of item design, which is properly tiering the costs of items. So there are some items in the game that are clearly, oh, I'm not doing well. I'm not going to invest in myself. I'm going to invest in my team utility. So we'll take the example of like Morellonomicon or arguably Thornmail or mortal reminder where, hey, these are not efficient DPS items, right? Merlin, you are paying for raw health and AP and stats and getting no damage stats back. That is a very, very, very bad damage item. Merlin is a very, very bad damage item. As far as selfish damage item is concerned, it's horrible at it. Rylai is in a similar boat, right? You are paying 3,000 gold for just 90 AP and no unique passive. Void Staff's always better. Shadow Flame, always better. Rising Focus, always better. Death Cap, always better. More expensive, sure, but always better. Demonic Embrace, always better. Right? There are 5 item slots right there that are always better than Rylai's for damage. Lich Bane, always better. Cosmic Drive, always better. Right? Like, it keeps going. Everything is better than Rylai's for damage output. You are never buying Rylai's as a damage item. So it kind of makes sense that it doesn't have 90 AP anymore because you're not lying to players about how much it's really giving you. But also, the idea is, okay, I'm not doing well, so I don't have as much gold income because I'm not doing well, but I still want to contribute to the team. So the idea of saying, oh, I'm doing well on Malzahar, I'm going to go Death Cap Void Staff, or, Shadow Flame Death Cap, or Horizon Focus Death Cap. Horizon Focus works on the R. It works on long-range Qs. Like, as long as you're R'ing someone, you're going to get Horizon Focus value. Like, there's an argument there. Demonic Embrace, damage item again, right? Like, there are a lot of good, selfish damage items on Malzahar. But he also has the option of going with Rylai's. It's like, I'm not doing well, I'll just go Rylai's here. We can look at Zyra as a support, for example, or Brand as support, for example. And by the way, they're also playable mid laners, just FYI, they are playable there. The idea is saying, hey, I could go Liandry's into Demonic, into Void, into Death Cap, and I could, try to one-shot people. Ooh, we're not doing well down here. All right, well, that's fine. I'm 1 and 3 on Brand. We're going Rylai's. Right? And I get it cheaper, I provide the utility, and I think that is really, really intelligent, right? That the item cost reinforces the design of, this isn't a me item, this is a team item. I think it's really, really smart, and it's something that I like really, 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 really support. It's actually part of why I didn't super love the Seraph's change, because Seraph's doesn't fit my internal rubric of what a cheap item should be, because Seraph's doesn't have any team utility. Now, it arguably has a selfish durability utility, which is like, hey, I'm not doing well, I want the durability item, but like tier is not the I want durability thing. So anyway, it's getting off topic, but like that's my ideas on the item design here. Next up, this was micropatched, is going to be part of the thing. It wasn't part of the old patch notes that I was referencing when I was building this out, but Turbo Chemtank now doesn't give you stacks when dealing damage to minions. It's monsters and champions only, so it works for junglers, it works for in the middle of a fight, but it doesn't stack off minions, so you don't gain 5 stacks for auto, and then, dash in and Chemtank someone. Or even just like walk up and, try to get an explosion. I think it's an AoE, so, hit the backline minion, hit them with it. Actually, I believe Turbo Chemtank was an AoE around you. I brought up that it works with Poppy. I don't know if that's been changed yet, but whatever. And now it's, gain 1 stack for every 15 units traveled and no longer being capped. It's capped at up to 10 stacks per movement command. So 1 stack for 15 units means 10 stacks for 150, right? So, you get up to a 150 dash worth of your thing, which is very low, right? Akali E, Akali R, they're well more than 150. A Vayne Tumble's pretty close. This will slightly nerf things like Hecarim R. It will slightly nerf things like Rammus R. Like these Volibear R is the same thing. It's another one where you're going to dash. Like, you are going to get fewer stacks for those abilities. Like, this is still going to nerf them to a small degree, but they're doing this like exactly once per fight. They're all ultimates. Okay, Zac, yeah, he doesn't get a ton out of a Chemtank jump, but like, sorry, Zac, you're not going Chemtank, I guess. It's a bit worse for you, but maybe it was already channeled up anyway when you were ready to go. I don't know. But yeah, it's a nerf to Chemtank Akali, which you might not have seen, but is her best build by far and is absurd. Next up, Chemtech Drake is, once again, the soul is being nerfed from 80% plus 80% bonus health to 70% plus 40% bonus health. So even squishier. Zombie duration without other healing factors means it's now 3 seconds long. Obviously, if you're damaging them, if they're healing back up, this all happens. Okay, great. Cool beans. Chemtech Rift. Now, the offensive action camouflage timer is now 2.5 from 1.5 seconds, so you're camouflaged for a lot less time. Also, the bonus damage with enemies with more current health goes up to 12% instead of up to 10%. So this is another, like, if you're behind. So by the way, if you didn't know, Chemtech Rift, the fog gives everyone functionally now 3 stacks of Chemtech Drake, which is more damage to enemies with more health than you. And it's not health percent, it's flat amount of health, which means like a Set who's ahead has more health than a Darius who's ahead, which means Darius just gets damage against Set. Until like they both get injured and go back to equal, then, it turns off, whatever. But like, it's worth pointing out that, like, look, the Chemtech Rift Dragon, or the Chemtech Dragon, does not help the ahead carry, right? Like, the full health Zoe just doesn't have a Chemtech Dragon if she's hitting squishies at any point in time during any of her combat. She just doesn't have a dragon buff. The Chemtech Rift as well. Okay, of course, the camouflage can matter. Of course, it can help you win the game and whatnot. But again, bonus damage while in the fog. Cannot help the Poke Zoe. Cannot help the Corki. If he's hitting Ornn, yes, but if he's not, nothing. And then also here, Hextech Drake is doing less damage. Now, I don't know if it actually is 25 at 1, or if it's, you know, scales from 9 onwards like we have with most mythic items, but scaling to 75 and scaling to 50. Worth noting that, like, this thing barely scales. If it is from 9 plus, then okay, it's like pretty decent scaling, but again, a ultimately late game nerf, aka nerf to Hextech Drake and Hextech Soul. So one thing I want to point out now that we are on the Drake point, there's some pretty good public data out there. So I'm going to shout out leagueofgraphs.com. They have cool data. One of the things they have is the win rate of Dragon Souls. Now, it's a little unsophisticated. There can be all kinds of behavioral biases that, like, oh, okay, you know, winning teams don't prioritize Cloud Soul as often, so in games where there's a Cloud Soul, it's grabbed later on, and the game is more definitively over, because if you're winning at 35 minutes, that's more indicative of you're absolutely winning the game than winning at 20 minutes. And that's, you know, a fair argument, of course. So there are behavioral biases that can't be accounted for with this. That said, Hextech Drake, Hextech Soul, and what's also, by the way, a conflating factor here, but an interesting confounding variable, is by definition, a Dragon Soul is always on its own Rift, right? You cannot get Chem Soul without being on Chem Rift. You cannot get Hextech Soul without being on Hextech Rift. That's just like the rules of the dragons, right? So the two highest win rate Dragon Souls are, unsurprisingly, Chem Soul and Hextech Soul. But it's worth noting that Hextech Soul is the highest win rate. Hex Soul is the highest win rate soul in League of Legends. So one thing that's interesting to me is people have been talking about how they really dislike Chem Rift and they really dislike Chem Soul. And one of the reasons they cite is it feels like, well, we just can't win. You know, it's just not possible to win. You know, once they get Chem Soul, we just lose the game. And what's funny is what's actually true is it's very strong, don't get me wrong, but Hex Soul is even more true, and yet no one brought that one up, right? So, and what I think it's to mean is, like, ultimately, so yes, I mean, obviously Chem Soul is very, very strong. Yes, it is, of course, right? The Rift of the Dragon together. But the actual OP win you the game one is actually Hex Soul. That's the real one that wins you the game. So by the way, that's the real one that wins you the game. That's the valuable one, the more valuable one. What's also interesting is Infernal Soul is the lowest win rate Dragon Soul, which I just think is kind of interesting, right? That has the least impact in actually forcing you to win the game. Ultimately, the difference between and it makes a logical sense, and I've tried to explain this many times on broadcast, is if you're already winning, you know, Infernal Soul doesn't really do anything you can't already do, right? You're already ahead. You're probably already one-shotting them. So what's really changing here, right? Okay, you might hit a breakpoint where you, like, close the game out and LeBlanc finally finishes killing that champion, and that's somewhat relevant, sure. And, like, it's clearly good, but it's not doing anything you're not already doing. By comparison, a Mountain Soul prevents the pick that would have let the comeback happen, and is unsurprisingly the strongest soul of the old Dragon Souls. Now, Hextech Drake gives you crowd control, which means that if you catch someone out at all, right, like, you already had more damage, but you might not have had CC. Well, now you have CC, so now you're catching them and killing them. And the Chem Soul one is, you know, there's an argument to be made that, like, well, it doesn't help you do anything, you know, you don't get any extra picks, but it does mean that comeback fight that would have tried to win the game back for the enemy team, well, your zombies come back and now there's no comeback after all, right? They don't get to Baron after acing you. And so it locks in your position. Like, Hextech is a win more. It's like, well, now we've caught you and now you're definitely dead. Chem Soul is a no comeback where you just revive. Infernal is a worse version of win more, and Mountain is a slightly worse version of no comeback. And then there's Ocean and Cloud in the middle, where they just do kind of neat things. Where again, you know, if the losing team is getting a comeback, they're one-shot and switching anyway. Ocean doesn't help them, right? So just kind of interesting. And then to go back to the point about conflated variables, the souls overlap with the Rift, which means, you know, there is some mix of Chemtech Rift plus Chemtech Soul together make it the second most snowbally option. Hextech Rift plus Hextech Soul combine as the most snowbally option. So, you know, how much of it is the Hex Gates, how much of it is the Soul, how much of it is the Chem Fog, how much of it is the Zombie mode, because they can't both be the best, right? If the Chem Fog was the best snowballing option and the Zombie was the best snowballing option, Chem Soul would be the best Soul, but it's not. It's the second best, and you know, again, I'm kind of railing on. This is kind of the end of the point, but worth pointing out that that's the data. Okay, we have one more good change, which is lethal tempo is getting shifted. It is getting pushed out of early game in toward late game. So minus 3% attack speed at level 1 for melee champions, but eventually by level 15, plus 2% attack speed for them. For range, the scaling is a bit quicker, minus 2 for the first few levels, plus 2 by level 12, but doesn't scale beyond to 13 of note, but whatever. So we took the 2 most commonly running lethal tempo champions and looked at it. So here is Caitlyn, which is a ranged tempo user. It is weaker levels 1 through 6. And stronger level 7 through 18. The vast majority of the game is level 7 through 18. So overall, lethal tempo is stronger, arguably, or at least lethal tempo is stronger for a larger portion of the game. Now, of course, the case can very easily be made that early game means more, because early game can snowball you into late game, and that's a very relevant argument. And I think is supported pretty well by just evidence, but also it is a bigger percentage of power, right? So at level 12, when we've maxed out our lethal tempo, we can compare the numbers here, and it's like, well, at level 1, we lost 7.4% attack speed, at level 12, we gained 6% attack speed, and then it gets lower from there the more we level up and the more we buy items. So there's a case to be made that this could be a nerf overall to ranged champions. Now, I would argue it's not. I would say it's overall a buff. That is the argument I am definitively going to make here, that the win rates will go up for the tempo, but it does make it a slightly more of a scaling option, but I think is a positive for the rune. The other keystones scale, this one should probably scale too. Now, I will say that attack speed, by definition, does scale via the fact that the more your total attack damage grows, the more you want the attack speed, but yeah, sure, moving on. You know, getting to 6 stacks is more likely to happen in a team fight than in a laning phase pattern, which means you're, you know, using 6 stack attack speed a lot more. The bonus range, all that stuff, using a lot more in the late game. Now for melee champions, aka Yasuo, 1 through 9 is weaker, 10 through 18 it's stronger. This one that you can more clearly argue is actually a nerf. Keep in mind it finishes scaling at 15 here, but you know, 1 through 9, though it is not half of the game, it is half of the levels, and I would argue is about half of the game overall. Also, it is, and this is, by the way, you know, you have 10% less attack speed when fully stacked. Now, you are frequently not fully stacked in the early game, right? You're autoing 3 times and the trade ends. And so the actual difference is not 10% less total attack speed. It's 4% less total attack speed because you only ever got a 3 stack lethal tempo. Whereas in late game fights, as for example, Caitlyn, you really are getting 6 stacks and using the 6% more attack speed. Whereas a level 1 Caitlyn trade is 2 autos long and you're getting a 3% attack speed nerf, right? So there's a counter argument as well that the combat pattern, because it's stacking, because we are, right, because we're frequently using 1, 2, and 3 stacks in the early game and we're using 6 stacks in the late game, you know, we're not really feeling the nerf very much, which is also, I think, a completely reasonable argument and one worth making and one that I agree with. So the nerf is bigger, I would say, on paper than it is in the real world, though again, this is still going to move the calculus somewhat. ARF is back, VFX updates to Sona and Vayne, bug fixes and quality of life changes, cool stuff there. Alrighty, let's scroll back up to the top. Patch 12.2 TLDR. A bunch of changes here to a bunch of different champions. Zeri's coming out. Zeri looks super, super cool. Janna is getting basically very similar move speed, but a lot more when running toward allied champions. That's going to be the TLDR of that change. Her base AD, counting her old passive, is going to be roughly the same, but her base attack range is lower. Here's the rest of the calculation for Tailwind. Howling Gale is absurdly stronger. The rank up is better. This thing is moving between like 20 and 30% faster, while also going, you know, 1 to 10% farther. This is a substantial buff to the usability of Howling Gale, and is a really big deal that cannot be overstated. This is massive. This could be like a 2 to 3% win rate bump by itself. Zephyr is overall getting a longer slow, but a longer cooldown. The base damage is up in the early game and lower in the late game. And here's what's the calculus on move speed, you know, going back into this whole move speed thing that I TLDR'd for you earlier. Eye of the Storm overall is going to be a, I would say an arguably bigger shield in most cases, because you're probably going to land some CC and then get your bigger shield. The cooldown is going to be kind of a bit more debatable, where just one cooldown refresh is not going to make the cooldown actually... well, okay, it's. I guess I have to remake the argument. Okay, if you get exactly one spell hit between casts, the shield value is the same or better, and the cooldown, at least by late game, is better, but by early game is weaker. And if you get multiple hastes per cast or between casts, the cooldown is definitely worse, and the shield is no different. Because I don't believe it's. I don't believe it stacks. Maybe it does, and I'm trolling, but who knows. Now, I will say, though, that the shield decay starts later, which means the overall shield power is stronger, and you aren't always getting Ws and Qs to land in between casts, so you sometimes just get a better cooldown on Eye of the Storm. Monsoon just ticks faster, no difference in actual functionality, though. Lulu was second cooldown on W, okay, great. Nocturne gets 10 health growth and 10% higher AD ratio on Q. Moderate mid to late game buffs on him, okay, great. Qiyana gets some base health regen down and less invisibility on Q. She has definitely been a very strong mid laner, especially in ultra high elo, so cool to see that. Rengar now jumps from camouflage, so yes, at level 6 and beyond, he can use the Chemtank Rift, and he can use Senna as a launching platform. Samira got hit really hard by shield bone nerfs and is getting 50 flat damage on her R. Should be pretty meaningful, should help quite a bit. Senna Q now slows. I think I overlooked that one last time we went through the change list, but Senna Q now has a slow. It scales off of bonus AD. Keep in mind, 200, 300 bonus AD is... really pretty late game, but yeah, that does bump that slow up to about 50% and can be quite meaningful. Shen gets 1% max health damage off of his empowered Qs, which is happening 3 times per spell cast. Ends up being a pretty meaningful damage drop, and definitely going to be felt here. Tahm Kench gets a bunch of big changes. The slow output is better. His amount of damage toward the gray health is hit with an absolute sledgehammer when played in a solo lane, such that we're probably going to max this ability second in top lane, but is unchanged in a duo lane. And the amount of healing you get from gray health is going up as a flat amount. So essentially, support Tahm Kench is getting more healing from gray health and a bigger slow and a better ulti shield. Top Tahm Kench is getting far less health regen in the early game, which should curb his early game a lot and might leave room for buffs down the line. And that could be pretty meaningful. But Devour is getting 300 points onto the shield, 50% higher AP ratio as well, and he's now hasted while devouring an ally, which is a very big deal and should mean a lot. I'm expecting very big things for support Tahm Kench win rate wise, and for top lane Tahm Kench, I mean, it should be a strict negative aside from this slow, so we'll see what happens. Talon loses about 19% of his jungle damage off of his rake. As time goes on, it's going to mean less and less since camps don't scale in health, and the passive in the queue can do more of the heavy lifting on clear speed. But yeah, the first few clears is going to be a lot slower, and he's probably going to be, I would say, an overall very weak jungler. I would argue not worth playing at any elo. Tristana is getting some flat health and flat health regen. Moderately useful here. Still going to be a slightly weak champion, but whatever. Veigar gets a very large buff. By the way, Veigar, as a farm bot lane, is absurdly strong, and it's going to be yet another mage that people should really play down there. He is so good. There are a ton of absurdly strong bot lane mages that are really worth playing. Veigar is now definitely among them. I'm going to plant my flag in the ground. By the end of the year, barring any future changes, Veigar bot will be in pro play, and players will realize that he is incredibly good. We see Ziggsmot as now a fully meta bot laner. He has been as good as he was for the last 5 years. In fact, got nerfed sometime during the last year, and is still a meta pro pick in bot lane. Ziggs is going to see even more, right? And Ziggs now sees pro play. Veigar is going to eventually get to the Ziggs spot unless there are further changes. Veigar is pro viable. Veigar should be played. Volibear is getting 0.5 AD growth and 2 seconds off the E cooldown. He is overall a very lightly scaling jungle and top lane pick. He's slightly weaker as a top laner than a jungler. This will push a little bit more power towards top lane, and he'll be a little bit more of a scaling pick, but it's not by a large margin by any means, but overall it's where it's going. Yasuo, after losing a bunch of power off of the shield bone nerf, is getting up to 3 to 5% more damage on the Q. Yone got hit with shield bone nerf as well, also getting 3 to 5% more damage on the Q. Now, I want to point out that these are not picked very commonly, but for both Yone and Yasuo, Gale Force is a competitive option. Really try Gale Force on these champs. It's a good item. Use the mobility. These champions already have innate shields via the Yone W, via the Yasuo passive. You can just go for a Gale Force, and it gives you a lot of power. Try it. It's good. Zed losing some pretty much upfront damage on the R. When the pop comes in, it's going to do quite a bit less damage. So meaningful here. Lich Bane. Basically, this amounts to less damage until 800 ability power. So Lich Bane is always less damage. Always less damage, but 15 extra ability haste and a shorter cooldown is probably going to make up for that, and Lich Bane is going to overall probably be a stronger item. Rylai's Crystal Scepter is substantially buffed to the tune of basically it's 400 gold cheaper for 200 less gold worth of stats is the quick math. It is now more than 100% gold efficient before the debuff, and of course the debuff to slow enemy champions is very, very strong. I love the design of cheap Rylai's. It is a very good item and very worth picking up. A lot of mage supports should really, really be considering buying Rylai's as their first big item after Mythic. Also want to point out there is some tech that is really worth bringing up here, which is Seraphine should be buying Rylai's. I know it feels kind of bad not to get more haste, not to get more mana. It feels bad to delay Seraphs. It feels bad to delay a Mythic. I'm not saying you should buy it first, but like Rylai's should be considered core on Seraphine. Rylai's should be considered core on Seraphine. It is very, 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 very good. It means your E automatically roots, and the double cast then automatically stuns with no help from your teammates. That is a really, really big deal. Rylai's has a fully beneficial interaction with Seraphine E. If you want to Q first to get the slow to help make sure you can land the E, that works too. But Rylai's should be considered core on Seraphine. Learn. Turbo Chemtank no longer gains a lot of stacks when dashing, which helps cut down things like Chemtank Akali being a bit abusive. Chemtech Drake Soul, overall going to give a worse zombie form. Chemtech Rift, overall going to be worse at camouflaging, but giving more damage in the Chem Fog to low health champions. And Hextech Drake is going to overall provide less damage, as both Hextech Soul and Chemtech Soul are the winningest Dragon Souls on Summoner's Rift, which is a mix of probably the Rifts being strong and the Souls being strong, so they are being nerfed. Smart by the designer to keep those nerfs coming. Lethal Tempo is weaker 1 through 6 for ranged, and weaker 1 through 9 for melee, and then stronger from then on. It's debatable if this is an overall buff or a nerf to the rune, but I think overall a smart reshape and properly designed here, so cool beans. That's it for the patch rundown. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.